something wrong. It's like a splinter in our mind, but we can't quite define it. Something is not right with this reality. And the only way out of this dualism is to realize our true nature and to acquire certain special knowledge or awareness. And this knowledge and awareness seems to dictate that we don't belong here. We seem to have become entrapped here, possibly through our own fault, but not necessarily so. And we are stuck in a cycle of birth and death until we acquire the Gnosis, the knowledge, the awareness to ascend. So Gnosis, or knowing, knowledge, as opposed to faith.
Righto, welcome to Strange Mysterious World, Season 4, Episode 1. We're back for a whole new season. And our first guest up is going to be our local priest, Father Damon Urbani. We're going to be chatting about Gnosticism and why your grandmother loves it so much. So let's bring him on. How's it going, Will? Sorry.
I only actually said that. But anyway, Father Damon Urbani, he's part of the liberal Catholic Church, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it, Father Damon?
How's it, Father?
Well, and yourself?
Yeah, good.
Good, thanks. Jesus, awesome. That's a cool jacket. It's like you're about to go hiking up the Himalaya mountains or something.
Yes,
very
my
cool,
sister got it for me. It's really cold here. I'm cold.
It's very cool.
Okay. Is it raining there by you?
No, but the skies are overcast and a terrible wind is blowing, and it's cold.
Okay. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of stuff in the air. What's happening around the world?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a lot of dust later on when I was outside.
Yeah.
The wind is kicking up a lot of dust, obviously because we haven't had rain. It's not the rainy season, so it's very dusty. Yeah, but if I look overdressed, just forgive me, I'm cold.
No, that's fine.
My flat is colder inside than outside.
I've got the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, Father, we want to know, what is Gnosticism?
And why does my grandmother love it so much?
It's not just my grandmother. My cousins love it as well. The book, the Gnostic Bible that I held up at our last conversation, has gone viral. Everyone has ordered it. All my cousins in the UK have ordered it.
Yeah.
Father Eugene got a copy. So
okay.
Oh, wow.
We've all been looking and reading the Gnostic Gospels. So that's very good. So, yes, a very interesting thing, of course. And let's just look at the word. Gnosticism is a feminine Greek word meaning knowledge or awareness. And in terms of a theological reference, a special kind of knowledge, and has come to, if you look it up on Wikipedia, it will tell you that it was an old heresy of the 1st and 2nd centuries of the Christian era. But of course, that's not 100% true, because Gnosticism predated Christianity. And the essential aspects of Gnosticism probably came to us through Zoroastrianism, which is a dualistic religion. Now, what do we mean by dualistic? Most religions, or many religions, let's look at the Hindu term, Advaita Vedanta means non-dualistic. Ad, non-vaita, Dvaita, non-dualistic, and Dvaita Vedanta means dualistic. Now, the argument is that on this level, everything seems to be separated in that, but ultimately all things are one. Now, we don't argue with that. That is ultimately true, and that would be Advaita, non-dualism. But the reality of our everyday experience in this lower realm is certainly Dvaita, dualistic. It seems to be a little bit silly to say yes, but it doesn't matter. Whatever happens doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's all one. When you're suffering in this lower realm and you're experiencing the duality, the separation, even if it is an illusion, it's a powerful enough illusion to define our experience here as dualistic. The difference between the lower nature, physical, astral, or emotional and mental, and the higher nature of the soul and the spirit. And they do seem to war against each other. And this is the dualism that we're talking about. ultimately that all things come from a spiritual source that is non-dualistic, but having fallen down into the lower realms, acquires a dualistic aspect through this illusion of separation that we have on this level. And so this dualism, which seems to have had its first real expression in the old Zoroastrian Persian religion, seems to have influenced not only old Judaism, but also Christianity and Islam and intermittent religious beliefs like Manichaeism. So what do we mean by Gnosticism? Gnosticism is a theological or philosophical attribute that seems to declare that there's something wrong with this world on the lower realm, the physical, emotional, and lower mental realm. Something is very flawed in it. There's something wrong with it. And that our true source is of a higher nature in the spiritual realm. And you'll remember that while we were recording our last discussion, we came to the conclusion that we are the fallen, that our souls and our spirits have fallen into this lower realm and now are experiencing this dualism. And the only way out of this dualism is to realize our true nature and to acquire certain special knowledge or awareness. And this knowledge and awareness seems to dictate that we don't belong here. We seem to have become entrapped here, possibly through our own fault, but not necessarily so. And we are stuck in a cycle of birth and death until we acquire the Gnosis, the knowledge, the awareness to ascend. So Gnosis, or knowing, knowledge, as opposed to faith. And of course, that is one of the big problems that the early church had with the Gnostic interpretations, is that it doesn't require the faith, it requires a special kind of knowledge. Now, Gnosticism predates Christianity, as I've indicated before, and in particular with a very strong religion that became very strong in the 1st and 2nd centuries, the 3rd century, in the old Persian Empire, which was Manichaeist, which basically was an amended form of Zoroastrianism, but emphasized the dualistic nature and emphasized a Gnostic interpretation of that dualism, that we are souls that have become entangled and stuck in a lower nature, and our only way to release ourselves is acquiring certain knowledge or gnosis, a personal, very personal experience of becoming aware of certain reality, and using that gnosis as opposed to blind faith. Now, as we know, many of the early Christian sects followed a kind of Gnosticism. And by the way, the term Gnostic is not universally accepted by everyone. It's still being defined as to what it was. But it seems to be that many of the early Christian sects held a Gnostic view. Christianity certainly does have a dualistic aspect to it, as in God and the devil, or Christ and Satan, as opposed to each other, the spirit warring against the lower nature, and the lower nature warring against the higher nature, as expressed in the Gospels, does seem to be a reality in this religion. So there is a kind of dualism in it. And this, of course, these Gnostic sects were wiped out before the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. And the specific Gospels that we've mentioned before, including the Gospel of Thomas and various other Gospels, were considered anathema, were considered to be somehow wrong. This was a Christianity that was heretical, went against orthodoxy, and so was wrong. And for a very long time, that seemed to be the prominent teaching in the West, with a few exceptions. And of course, a number of those exceptions were the Bogomils in Bulgaria, and also the Cathars in northern Italy and southern France, who seem to be descendants of this early Gnostic form of Christianity, which didn't accept the Council of Nicaea or the Orthodox Church and Rome's prelature, etc., and had gone their own way. and very few people realize that one of the first crusades ever conducted by the Roman Catholic Church was against the Albigensians, the Cathars, and they were actually wiped out. And they say that more than 1 million people were actually wiped out in southern France because the church wanted to impose its form of Christianity upon them. And these Cathars, the word catharsis comes from them, the pure, purified. When you go through a catharsis, you go through a purification. They didn't have the same sacraments, the 7 sacraments of the Roman Catholic Church. They had their own forms of acquiring this awareness, this Gnosticism, this knowledge, and they firmly believe that we are trapped in a lower realm, and that we are stuck in a cycle of birth and death and reincarnation, and that Christ came down to the earth to remind us of who we were and to open a way for us to redemption, to find release out of this endless cycle of birth and death, being held in bondage in this lower realm, and return to the higher realms of light. But by all means, this form of thought, this Gnostic thought, was pre-Christian and then became adopted by certain early Christian sects. And we've mentioned before the Mandaeans of Iraq, who are the direct descendants of the disciples of John the Baptist. When the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in the 70s AD, and all the diaspora started, these particular people left the River Jordan and went down into the Tigris and Euphrates, to those rivers, and they're there to this very day. They are the disciples of St. John the Baptist. And the early Crusaders called them Christians of St. John. And they have the sacrament of baptism. It's a renewable baptism. Every Sunday they are rebaptized. And then they have the sacrament of bread and water as opposed to bread and wine. They believe that John the Baptist was in fact the Messiah and that Jesus was an interloper that came in and they shouldn't have been. And they're there to this day. And unfortunately, they suffered terribly under the ISIS, which, this recent ISIS established in Iraq and Syria and all those countries which tried to form an Islamic state. They were severely persecuted, along with another Gnostic sect, the Yazidis, who also predate Christianity. They were massacred and enslaved. And so a lot of them are now in a diaspora in the Western world, but they still are there. And this is one of the indications that the original teaching of John the Baptist and his disciple Jesus Christ, because he took baptism from John the Baptist, and when John the Baptist was beheaded, he took over, seemed to have taken over this early sect, this Jewish Gnostic sect. It seems to have been very Gnostic in its outlook. As we've mentioned in previous talks, Jesus was in continuous conflict with the Pharisees. They seem to represent two very different forms of Judaism. The other forms of Judaism that became extinct were the Sadducees, whose only interest was in the running of the temple and who didn't actually have a belief in the afterlife. And in the various Essenes, sects like Essenes, which Jesus seems to have been in a similar kind of situation to the Essenes. So this is where the term gnosos, the Greek word for knowledge, in this case, a special kind of knowledge. You have to be aware on a certain level in order to understand your situation. And that as opposed to faith. Now, you can still have both gnosos and faith, as I do, but gnosos is important, to have a certain knowledge and a direct awareness, a direct experience of the truth of the reality that we find ourselves in, our predicament. And so you have this Gnosticism re-emerging. And of course, what helped that was the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library in 1945 in Egypt. And it took another 2 years for those documents to be disseminated out of that area because of the controversial way in which those documents were found. It was probably grave robbing that brought them to light, but thank God they were brought to light. And amongst those, of course, the wonderful text of the Gospel of Thomas and various other ones. And then very recently, the discovery of the Gospel of Judas, which puts a completely different slant on the biblical narrative. So this is what we mean by gnosis, a special knowledge of our predicament, that there's something seriously wrong with the world, like in the movie The Matrix. He says, we know that there's something wrong. It's like a splinter in our mind, but we can't quite define it. Something is not right with this reality. And this philosophy of Gnosticism, which was, and still to this day, by mainstream Christianity, is regarded as a heresy, but is certainly now being re-looked at, and especially in light of this discovery of these early Gnostic texts, which were originally regarded as anathema. So that's where it comes from.
Okay.
And that's the meaning of the word.
Now, I want to ask you something. There was, I know you mentioned Zoroastrianism kind of predating Christianity, but there was another religion that was very similar. I think kind of modern Christianity borrowed a lot from it. It was Mithraism.
Yeah, Mithra. Well, Mithra, remember, Mithra was one of the original gods of Zoroastrianism. So Mithra is one of the angelic entities within the Zoroastrian religion. Zoroastrianism originally was not monotheistic, with Ahura Mazda, the wise spirit, as opposed to Ahriman, the evil spirit. They had a number of deities, and Mithraism actually spread from the Persian Empire into the Roman Empire, and it was a especially strong cult within the Roman army. In fact, our own patron saint of our church, Saint Alban, the martyr, whose martyrdom we celebrated on Sunday, was part of the Mithraic cult. The ancient Roman army had long since desisted from worshipping the ancient gods Jupiter and Juno and Apollo and all of those things, although that was the state religion. And people belonged to these little cults. And Mithraism, which was adopted from the Persians, is one of those cults, the Mithras. Mithras is a saving angelic being in the Zoroastrian religion, very Christ-like in his manifestation. And indeed, we think that many of the things within Catholicism were actually carried over from the Mithraic cult, including our vestments. A Catholic priest's vestments are basically the normal everyday dress of a Roman gentleman. The long white alb, that is the garment that was worn under the toga. So you wore that long white alb. Alb means white. We still wear that over our cassocks when we vest, and then you'd fold your toga over that. We still retain that dog. And the chasuble that we wear during Mass was a normal travel garment, like a cloak, like a poncho. And so a lot of these things we believed were carried over. The Mithraic cult had their holy day on a Sunday, was hidden. So it has a certain Masonic type of feel about it, that you had to be initiated into the cult onto different levels. And there was that harmony, the love feast that happened after the worship, that they worshipped in temples that were underground, that kind of thing. So we had a very interesting sermon from our bishop, who maintained that St. Alban Martyr was a Freemason. But of course, we know that Freemasonry only goes back a few hundred years, probably descended from the Knights Templar, possibly. But we know that there were similar things that had evolved out of that could have been available in the Roman Empire, etc. Bishop Leadbeater maintained that it goes back to the ancient Atlantis. So yeah, remember that Mithras came out of the Zoroastrian religion. The Mithraic cult was an adaptation of that Zoroastrian religion within the Roman Empire, specifically the Roman army.
Okay. Now, if I stand to be corrected, but Zoroastrian, isn't it still alive today? Aren't there people still practicing?
It is, but it is a minority religion in Iran.
Yeah.
Of course, it came from Iran. We think that Zoroaster was actually born in Azerbaijan, in north of Iran in those days. It's an Iranian religion. But when Islam conquered Iran, many of the Zoroastrians fled, and they went to India, and specifically to Gujarat, and to certain of the cities on the eastern seaboard. And there is still a thriving Parsi community there. Now, the most famous Parsi known in the world today was Freddie Mercury, which of course wasn't his real name. He was a Parsi. that came from India. His parents came out of India. That Parsi just means Persian. So they are the largest sect that's still in existence. And then there are two smaller Zoroastrian sects within Iran. Iran permits that religion. It permits Christianity, Judaism, obviously Islam, and Zoroastrianism. But they are a minority religion in Iran. There's one fire temple in southern Iran where the sacred fire has been burning for 2,000 years non-stop. They keep the fire going and they feed it with sandalwood. So that sacred fire has been going for 2,000 years. I forget the name of the city. It's one of the port cities in southern Iran. Islam did force them to make certain concessions. One of the things that Zoroastrianism contained was that of sky burial. So the towers of silence. So when you died, your body was taken and left in one of these towers, and the vultures and things came and fed upon it. It was never buried because they believed that that would be a contamination of the earth. But Islam forced them to no longer use their towers of silence and to start burying people. So they accepted that. They are a minority religion, but they do still exist. So there are three major sects of Zoroastrianism that still exist. The largest one in India, and two that are still existent in Iran. Now, this is a religion that you can't convert to. You have to be born within it. They don't accept converts. And you'll see some of these modern stars and famous people put they're Zoroastrian. Actually, you aren't. Okay? They don't accept converts. You have to be born into these religions. You have to be born a Parsi to be a Parsi in India. So, yeah, they do still exist.
Okay, now I've got a question now, because you just brought something up now that's actually made me think about something. So you mentioned the Towers of Silence. It's actually a beautiful, for me, that's like a really beautiful way to say goodbye, whatever it is. And I see that exact thing that you described there. They use them in the American Indian burial. So
yes,
that's what the Sioux and
very similar
Navajo
concept,
and all of them used to do the same thing. They leave them out. They put them up on the towers. And then the birds of prey used to come and eat the body. That's so fascinating.
A sky burial. The Tibetans also use it. The Tibetans actually chop the body up and feed it directly to the vultures. So in Tibetan Buddhism, you can have that, or you can have a cremation, whichever one. So they also do that. It's a little macabre, but it's probably the most sincere, the most honest, because it doesn't contaminate the ground. And it doesn't contaminate the air, which cremation does do. We know esoterically that probably the best way to dispose of a body is through cremation 3 days after death, because death is not quite as instantaneous as what people think. It's a drawing inwards of the life force into inner dimensions, and that can take a process. But what cremation does do is that it destroys the physical, emotional, and lower mental bodies, and it destroys the etheric body. So societies that have cremation will not have a problem with ghosts, for example, being haunted by ghosts, because a ghost essentially is just the etheric sheath that has survived and it is taking time to break down. Rotting in the earth is a very long, slow, unpleasant experience, and it's much better to speed the process up. And you'll find that societies that have cremation don't seem to be troubled by ghosts. You can believe it or not. That's just the one thing I know.
That's actually fascinating. That's actually very, very.
Yeah, geez. So you get a choice. You're like, would you want to be vulture poo, or do you want to be burnt?
Well, look, the going through the digestive tract of any creature just breaks you down to your basics. So it's just returning the earth to the earth. Our bodies contain atoms that were created in supernovas billions of years ago. In the gold ring on your finger, the gold that came from that ring is billions of years old, those atoms that were created in supernovas. Our own sun is not powerful or large enough to create an element as heavy as gold. We think that when our sun eventually goes supernova, the heaviest element it will produce is carbon or something like that. So the atoms that make up our bodies probably made up the bodies of dinosaurs.
It's like
and
a
have been
plebs
floating around, as Carl Sagan used to say, we stardust. We really and truly are.
Yeah.
The important thing is that you want to separate the soul as quickly as possible from the corpse. You know what I mean? You don't want.
So what happens if you don't
the
separate
nature
it?
will be that the soul will try to stay with the corpse as long as possible because it's become so closely associated with it. You want to break that link as quickly as possible.
But what
and
happens
then,
if
of course,
you don't wait for the 3 days and you just burn like immediately? What happens?
well, but the thing is that you think that a person's dead. Okay, they're dead. They're not breathing anymore. The body grows cold, etc. But there's still life within that body. The life has to withdraw onto an inner dimension. Remember, when we say physical, this is obviously physical. Emotional is a more subtle body within that physical body. The mental is a more subtle body within that. The bodies of the soul and spirit are more subtle within it. So it's all internal. It's not up. You know, we always say up, you know, into heaven and that. Well, you know very well that if you go up, you're just going to get into space. And then you're probably going to meet some very odd things. It's just in space. It's not in the inner realm. So what we mean when we're looking up and raise his eyes to heaven is you're actually looking within. It's the inner dimension.
You didn't look up high enough. You got to like roll your eyes back into your head.
Yeah, precisely. And that's withdrawals. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead actually goes through the process. That's the book that prescribes the 3 days. But it's not only there. It seems to be in Hinduism and that as well. They seem to always worry, no, it must be about 3 days. Because first, you know, you've got the earth, the liquids, the air, and the fire. And so first of all, your physical body dies, then the waters, the fluids in the body stop flowing. Then the air in the body stops, you stop breathing, and then the fire goes out of your body and the body cools down. I remember when my mother passed away, I sat with her body for about 2.5 hours before they came to fetch her, and she slowly but surely, she died very peacefully. Slowly but surely, her body got colder and colder and colder. So death is actually a process of going in, and you don't want to interfere with that, but you also don't want to tempt the soul or other things, because remember all these Halloween characters that we have. We must do a program on Halloween, by the way, to check out and find out what the original archetypes were of zombies and vampires and all these things. They come from somewhere.
Cool.
So a person dies physically, but their emotional body is still alive. That's what we call undead. And they're able to astral project, and they are able to steal the life force of the people around them. So that has now been interpreted by Hollywood into the whole vampire thing. Remember the story of vampire does not cast an image in a mirror. That's because they physically aren't there. They're an astral projection. And of course, the idea of them drinking blood, the life is in the blood. So that's where they're stealing the life force, they're stealing the blood. So that's where that came from.
Oh, so that's when, like, when you see like these energy practitioners, they go like, "Oh,
Yes.
you've got an entity attached to you and it's draining you." Like,
you might have come across these people. I know I have. I don't want to say this. I've got a few of them in my congregation. People that attach themselves to you and they're energy drainers. I've got a few friends like that. They actually drain your energy. They seem to sap you.
Energy vampires.
And then, of course, you've got the old stories about reanimations. The Theosophists sometimes talk about the possibility that a corpse can be a freshly buried corpse can still be reanimated, but what goes into it is not the original soul which has already left, but something else, another spirit, and that can reanimate. And that's the origin of the zombies. So these are
in Buddhism. What is it? Buddhism.
Yeah, in voodoo. Now, of course, in voodoo, we know that it's what it is. It's a drug that's taken from the scales of a fish that just puts you into a very deep sleep. And when you wake up, you're very confused, that kind of thing. But these things are possible. We mustn't become too scientific and forget that a lot of things are possible that we might consider to be mysterious or superstition. All of these things have original archetypes and have their origin somewhere. So the tradition is that the best way to do it is to cremate the body after 3 days. The Book of the Dead in Tibetan, while the soul enters into Bardo Bardo, that middle thing, the place between different lives before it reincarnates, etc. So that's what is described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But yeah, so sky burial, returning the elements back to the earth. Yeah, it is the Muslim invaders of Persia were horrified by it. I can understand why that would be the case, because these birds scatter the bones and bodies all over the place, and it can look quite macabre. But it was probably the most natural. Yeah, but that was one of the things the Parsis had to change.
Okay, let me ask you a question now.
Not in India, in Iran.
Let me ask you another question.
In India, there are still towers of silence.
Okay. The Gnostic meaning. So let's go to Jesus.
Yes.
He died, and it took 3 days for him to rise. So has that 3 days not got something to do with what we've just been discussing now? And look, I know he rose, but maybe it was the fact that the 3 days he had to remain, so that whatever process was happening for those 3 days had to happen in those 3 days.
It's a possibility, Lee. We don't actually know what the narrative says is that Christ passed into hell. Now, the hell of the ancient word isn't the hell that was created in the Middle Ages by Dante Alighieri with his description of hell. It is Hades. He passed into Hades. That is the ancient world's understanding, the shadow realm, what lies beneath. And apparently he passed into the afterlife there and released a large number of souls that were stuck there. And then he was resurrected on the Sunday morning. So he died on the Friday afternoon. They thrust a spear into him because, remember, it was the Jewish Shabbat was starting. That starts at sundown on the Friday afternoon. So they killed him off quickly so that they could take him off the cross and bury him before Shabbat. Then he was in the tomb the whole of Friday night, Saturday, and he arose again on the third day, on the Sunday. Now, a lot of people look at it and say, okay, well, it's allegorical. Okay, his resurrection wasn't actually a resurrection. It just points to reincarnation. But I believe that he actually did resurrect. I believe there was a resurrection. I believe Jesus Christ was a manifestation of the Word, the Logos, the Word of God, and that he was actually able to accomplish a resurrection. And certainly, and people can take this as seriously as what they want to or not, with the recent evidence that's coming from the Shroud of Turin, the recent investigations into blood, into the cloth, into the pollen on the cloth, into the actual image on the Shroud of Turin alone. The image, which, as you know, is a negative image on linen, Syrian linen, which came from that part of the world, was produced in a split second of an enormous release of energy. So it's not the kind of thing that can be copied or fraudulated, like what they said that Leonardo, there was once, at one time, there was a conspiracy that Leonardo actually had painted it onto the cloth, etc. It now looks like that cloth is authentic. The coins that were on the eyes left marks. Those were coins that were minted by Pontius Pilate. Oh, wow. The hairstyle on the Shroud of Turin is the hairstyle of a Nazarene, the long hair with a single pony down the back. There was a crown of thorns. The forehead was fractured. It was also bruised as if he'd been punched in the face. The way his fingers had become deformed showed that there were nails through his hands and his feet. And the blood, everything on there now seems to be authentic. But the most important giveaway of all of this is the release of a sudden burst of gamma ray illumination that created the negative image. And so maybe we'll do a talk later on. I know I'm doing a lecture at our church on the latest evidence to come that's been lifted from the Shroud of Turin. It also proves that the original studies that were done in the 1970s were flawed. The carbon-14 was wrong. It was taken from the wrong part. It wasn't a part of the original shroud. And so, you know, we need to not be as skeptical, and we need to be not as indoctrinated by Western science as what we are. Things are possible. The mysterious happens. Things are possible, maybe not probable, but possible that we think are not possible, that science would debunk. But remember something else. Science denies the existence of spirit and soul. Science denies the existence of prana. Science denies the existence of the etheric, which we know because some of us can see it. So, and then science goes and does a complete loop. And the latest physics theories, of course, are of string theory. But string theory requires the existence of at least 11 dimensions.
But they do
So
ask
it
for
keeps
one
coming
miracle,
back
though.
to-
But science does ask for one miracle, that we came from nothing.
Well, you see,
The
the
Big
thing
Bang.
is,
We just like bang, poof, and we were there. So they do believe in one miracle, though. But then everything else
Yeah.
is just.
But remember, William, that miracle was just recently challenged. When they sent that Webb observatory telescope, one of the first images that it found was of a completely formed galaxy 25 billion light years away. They maintain that the Big Bang occurred 13.8 billion years ago. So how is it possible that they found a completely formed galaxy 25 billion light years away? The Big Bang theory is by no means completely accepted. We still don't fully understand dark matter. Dark matter seems now to be a seepage of matter out of another dimension into our dimension. And if you look at things like zero point energy, 0 point energy runs because it's running on seeped matter out of other dimensions. That's essentially what it is. So don't think for 1 second that science has it all.
They don't know what's going on. They're just making up.
They don't
rubbish.
actually know. Or
Just
there's
making
another
stuff
theory
up. They're just
that
like
they do know, but they're keeping it quiet because the true physics could be used against them. So there's two theories. One theory is that they actually don't know. The second theory is that they do know, but they are deliberately misdirecting information because then people will be able to utilize that against them, against the establishment. So you're welcome to
Love
interpret
that.
that any way you wish.
No, that's
That's
awesome.
cool. That's my thing for my next movie. Thank you.
But
Zero
look,
point
we
energy.
mystics. We wouldn't be on the show if we weren't mystics. We believe that there's more to reality than what the eye can see. And so we must also accept that there are things that are possible that modern science would declare are impossible. I mean, the soul, the existence of the soul. We have got proof of the soul. What's your proof of the soul? Conscience. Conscience is proof of the soul. Conscience is the voice of the soul. And we know what conscience is, and we know how powerful the impulse of conscience can be. And we also know that there's some people that don't seem to have that conscience, and therefore possibly don't have the soul. But for me, the evidence of the soul is the voice of the conscience. Your conscience is the real you. And the stronger your conscience and the more powerful its impulse, the more your soul is engaged, in the personality. So, but ultimately, Lee, we know something's wrong with this existence, with this reality.
We do, yeah.
So, is there anything did they teach anything to gain this knowledge, this gnosis, or is it how do you get the knowledge
Yeah,
to
there's
get
so
out of
many
here?
different things
Apart
that
from
it's
the books that they've left us, they were obviously teachings and things. But what they emphasize about Gnosis is a direct experience which no one can question. And I know from my own experience that's how it is. If you are a truly sincere seeker and you follow your conscience and you're a good person, and what I mean by that is that you are ethical and you are moral and you participate in certain exercises, certain things, and you're a true seeker, you're a committed seeker, these things will come to you. The mystery schools are no longer building somewhere. The mystery schools still exist on the inner realms. And if you attract that good attention, if you prove your commitment, then you will be engaged and you will be able to have these insights will flow. I think on your previous podcast, you were speaking to a man, and one of the things that he was speaking about was semen retention. Okay, so there's a clue. Okay, there is a clue for you. About the raising of the Kundalini. We know about those things. We can't talk about them openly on podcasts and things like that. But if you seek, you will find. If you knock, the door will be opened unto you. People mustn't think that becoming self-aware or attaining to a certain self-realization or gnosis makes things easy. It doesn't, because we know that this world is not ruled by we know that the world is ruled by evil. Okay? And we know that the lords of this earth do not punish evil, they punish non-conformity. Okay? So don't think for 1 second that your life becomes easy once you attain to these certain self-realizations. It doesn't, because they particularly don't like it. It's like in that movie, The Matrix. They don't like it when you wake up within the illusion. So they do everything in their power to cloud us, to block us, to prevent our acquisition of self-realization, our acquisition of certain awareness, and our acquisition of gnosis, this specific knowledge. And it starts with the simple thing that we were talking about now. Something is wrong with this.
But do you think that that's why it was so heretical, or that from why they stopped it? Because they didn't.
Yes, absolutely. Control. Religion is control. I can tell you now that the entities that rule this world, immediately a great teacher comes to the earth and finishes their mission. Look what they did to Jesus. For God's sake, they mutilated him. They immediately take that teaching and twist it to serve their own purpose. So the church became a control mechanism. They used fear. They introduced the idea of hell as the inferno, of eternal burning souls. People were controlled by fear. You don't ask the questions. Don't be heretical. Just do what we tell you to do, and you'll attain to heaven and all that kind of thing. It's a mechanism of control. The Buddha's ashes were not yet cold on his funeral pyre, and the very things that he preached against, which was over-ritualization, had already started to set in. Look at Tibetan Buddhism, and this is my personal opinion. I don't want to offend anyone, but Tibetan Buddhism contains so much of the old Bon shamanistic religion that it's bizarre. You know, they have all that other stuff that's in it that the Buddha would not have recognized. Siddhartha Gautama, the enlightened one, would never have accepted all of that. He would have immediately identified that as that's immediately a perversion. It obviously happened in Christianity as well, where there's an immediate perversion of the teaching just afterwards. Immediately, the first thing they did is they persecuted the Gnostic texts, and all the other early Christian sects were made anathema and blown away. Then you have the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea sets down the dogma of the Orthodox Church. Okay, which basically means you must have faith. You do this. The old medieval church basically really stopped people from asking questions. I mean, look what the church did to certain of the original scientists. Galileo, for example. Galileo was simply preaching what Copernicus had preached 100 years before in Poland, but he was persecuted for it, that the earth goes around the sun. Now, we know today that that is a fact. The church persecuted that because, why? Not because they didn't know that the earth went around the sun, but because the knowledge didn't come from the church. It came from someone outside of the church. And so what they did to Galileo is they took him, they didn't torture him, they showed him the implements of torture. They took him to the torture room and showed him the rack and the other implements of torture, and he recanted. Look what they did to Giordano Bruno, who was saying basically, yes, but all of these religions are basically teaching the same thing. You know, Neoplatonism. He shows you the statue of Isis with a baby Horus and Mary and baby Jesus, and he draws a connection with. They burnt him at the stake. So there's definitely religion is a mechanism of control. Now, this is a priest telling you that religion is a mechanism of control. And religion is a double-edged sword. Religion can do a lot of good. And the Catholic Church and the other churches have done a lot of good. They've built orphanages and hospitals and all of that kind of thing. But they also have a negative side. Remember, you have devotion. But the negative side of devotion is fanaticism. And we have to acknowledge that for all the good work that the church has done, it's also done some pretty bad stuff. I mean, we can't deny the fact of the Borgias, the Borgia papacy, Pope Julius and Pope Alexander. You know, those things were real. They happened. They're historical. Also, the Crusades and what happened in South America to the native civilizations there that were wiped out, etc. The church did some of these things. And you had a movement within the Catholic Church after Martin Luther's breakaway, which was called the Jansenite Rebellion. The Jansenites said, you know what, we Roman Catholic, but we acknowledge that the church has done a lot of bad things and the church does need reform. And there was an immediate attack on the Jansenites because although they were Roman Catholic, they said, you know, Luther had a point. The church is extremely corrupt and has allowed itself to be corrupted. Well, they were right. That's true. You've got to keep reinventing things. You've got to keep going through a catharsis, a purification process. These institutions of their own accord become corrupt. They all become corrupt. It doesn't mean that the idea is bad. It means that people make mistakes and people do wrong things. And when uninitiated men attain power within these institutions, it's very destructive. Then a lot of trouble comes, you know, and we lose the original teaching, the original spiritual understanding. These are my personal opinions. They're not the opinions of the church. I'm not given permission to actually speak on behalf of the liberal Catholic Church, but I am a liberal Catholic priest. And in our church, we're allowed to question certain things. You're allowed to have slightly divergent beliefs and things. And I think that it's only the open mind that can grow. A closed mind can't grow. You know, and I think that that's what rots religion. When religion becomes non-spiritual. And I'm sure you've encountered people that are not religious but very spiritual. But then you also get people that are very religious but not spiritual. Or you get spiritual people that are not religious. You might have encountered them. Yeah.
No, cool, man. Father, yes, as always, it's like really, it's really good to chat to you, man. You know, and I think, and as long as you're okay with this, we need to have you as a regular. I think at least if it's possible once a month. I know you said you wanted to do a podcast. I don't know if you mentioned it. I remember right in the beginning you wanted to do something on your own, whether it was a podcast or something. But you could probably just use us, and you know, you could pop on once a month, and we can chat about. I mean, there's so much to talk about, from the books, from each book to the Bible, to the Gnostic texts, to the new Gospels, to
Halloween.
There's so much to talk about.
That's one of my most popular lectures, is the Halloween lecture.
Yeah, we can go to everything.
I'm quite happy to do so, and I'm so happy that you invite me on. It gives me an opportunity to speak. I don't have the technical know-how to do my own podcasts, William. I am atrocious with technology. So, no, there's a lot of people that want me to do my own things. I'm not going to. So I'll continue to rather just be invited onto podcasts and invited to do lectures and things like that. I just don't have either the finances or the technological know-how to produce my own stuff. So I never will. I don't have that. But I'm always happy to be invited on. Today's topic, Gnosticism. We don't pretend to know everything at all. In fact, we retain a humility that comes from the awareness that we actually know nothing guaranteed. And we need to retain that humility because we're only starting to wake up now, starting to become aware of certain things. And there's still so much that we don't know, you know, and also so much is just opinions. These are opinions. Let's discuss them. Can we debate them? Let's go and look further. What is paramount here is the acquisition of knowledge. You can't debate these things if you're not educated. And I don't mean educated in universities and things. I mean educated by searching yourself. That will give you the direct experience. And the awakening, when you wake up and you realize I'm more than this, and somehow or another I've become stuck in something, and something is wrong here. And this is what has led me. So I'm Catholic, I'm Christian. Not quite in the same sense as most other Catholics and Christians. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe that he was a manifestation of the Logos. I believe in the Trinity, the triune aspect of God. But I believe that there's a lot of things that might have been gotten wrong. I believe in reincarnation. I believe in the laws of cause and effect. But I also believe in a duality, and I also believe in malice, and that there is evil in the universe as well. There's a counterweight that is trying desperately to prevent our awakening. Just like, a lot of Gnostics believe that The Matrix was not a movie, it was a documentary. And you have a few of those movies, like Dark City. Did you ever watch Dark City?
Yeah.
Dark City.
Well, even the Truman Show, in a way. Like, even the Truman Show.
Yeah. The Truman Show, absolutely. You can learn a lot from movies. I'm a lover of movies. I love movies. I've got a movie collection. The DVDs, you can't see it yet, but the DVDs are piled up against the wall there. I love movies. And you learn so much from these things because it's creative. You know what I mean? So indulge these things. Indulge the arts. You learn so much from the arts. Indulge history, philosophy, even alternative archaeology. Go and search for yourself. Don't just believe everything that you're taught, everything that you're indoctrinated. Ask questions. And the Bible itself encourages you. Knock, and the door will be opened.
It's so funny that archaeology is saying. I was in India like a few months ago, which is, I don't know, maybe it was a year ago, and I was trying to find the path of where Jesus went in India, and trying to get to those temples where they had documents of him being there and whatever. And we got to this one site, like where these monks had built this temple, and there was this Indian guy there. And I was obviously with Bibu. We've had him on the show, and this guy was speaking Hindi to Bibu, and I was like, "What is he saying?" He says, "No, that they were doing digging there, and they dug up a whole bunch of giant skeletons, and he doesn't know where they went to, but he was there and he saw them digging it up, and now they're gone." And how weird!
Okay, that seems to be something that's happening all over the world, by the way. It's almost as if they're trying to wipe out antediluvian truth. I mean, in America, all of those great mounds where they found the 9-foot tall skeletons and that, all of those have disappeared. They were sent to the Carnegie Foundation and to the museums, and they have disappeared.
Smithsonian.
Yeah, the Smithsonian, they have disappeared. And so someone is definitely manipulating all of this. We can feel it. We can feel that.
Yeah, because the thing is, I've heard that giant story so many times before, but I actually witnessed like a guy that he was just a little humble security guard at this temple, and he was like, they were digging down there, and they found these giant skeletons. He told us, like he was a witness. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Oh. Look, I'm a person that believes in an antediluvian high civilization. What they could have called Atlantis or Lemuria, whatever you want to call it, an antediluvian civilization that existed that was wiped out by a catastrophe, and humanity kind of clawed its way back, probably guided by some of the survivors. Possibly some of those survivors has acted negatively, pretended to be gods when they weren't, manipulated humanity for their own benefit. There's so many questions, William. We can sit here for hours.
That's what Graham Hancock says. We were a species with amnesia. And it was funny because when his documentary series came out on Netflix, it was called Ancient Apocalypse. There was all these articles in like serious magazines and newspapers saying it was the most dangerous series ever made. But it was just because he had like an alternative theory. He even says on the show, he's like, I'm not an archaeologist. This is just my research of when I go in here, and this is what I found. And he's not, and people just lost their shit. And it's not even that serious. He's just like, look, this is a thing over here, this temple. It's and then he gives a theory of like why he thinks it's that old, and people just went berserk. It was like,
People don't like the narrative to be challenged, especially the different disciplines. Like archaeology is one of the worst, geology, all of that. They don't like you to question their narratives because they've built up their whole existence on those narratives. But there's so much evidence coming out now, and because we have open communications and that, we don't know how much longer that's going to be, and people can talk to each other already. That whole that clamp down on knowledge and that has been broken, and that is very good. That is important now. William, you know who's in control when you can't. If you want to know who's in control, find out who you can't criticize, and very quickly you'll find out what's in control.
Yeah,
That applies also. That applies also to many things. The quickest way to get into trouble in this world, in this time, is to tell the truth. You will be in trouble very quickly. Look what's happening in Germany and in the UK, and that people are being arrested for memes, and they call themselves freedom and democracy. That's not freedom and democracy. That's not democracy. We have the illusion of democracy. We have the illusion of free will. They are illusions, though. They're not 100%. You can't question too much. And of course, a little podcast or something like that might get under the radar. But if you really start challenging, you'll very quickly get into trouble.
Yeah. I mean, if this hits 1 million views, then we'll probably be taken out. Haley. But
so it's sometimes best to be small, to keep small.
But Father Damon, what a honor, and geez, what an amazing conversation. Really enjoyed it. So inspiring. I'm going to go meditate now. I don't want to come back. I want to get to that. I'm knocking. I'm going to go knock on that door right now.
Knock on the Sky. Another movie, Tron. One of my another favorite movie, Tron. He calls meditation, I'm going to go knock on the sky.
Yeah. Okay, Father.
Thanks, Father. Much appreciated, man. We'll chat soon again.
Always welcome. I'll see you guys again maybe in a month or so, and we'll talk about something else, hopefully. Always very, very grateful to be invited. Have a wonderful evening and keep warm. The cold front is like, I can feel it.
I wish I had a jacket like yours, man.
My sister bought me this for my birthday. Thank you, Cremation. Without this jacket, I would have frozen.
Cool.
Okay, thanks, Father.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
Father.
my friends.
Enjoy your weekend.
God bless.
Sure,
Awesome.
that was cool.
Okay, man.
Nice.
Yeah, that's it for episode 1, season 4, and we're gonna get off now. And thank you for listening. As per usual, please like and subscribe. And William, thank you for your time as well again, as per usual. And guys, we'll chat to you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, bud.
Cheers, man.
In the dark where secrets hide, where truth and myth collide, whispers echo.